Welcome to the second installment of the Big History 2022. In this presentation, I will be talking about creation myths. Creational myths is a creation story, of course. Different culture, different religion, and different traditions will describe the earliest beginning of their world. Creation myths are the most common form of all myths, usually developed first in oral traditions and then passing through oral and then eventually finally into written form and then into different culture. And these creation myths are found throughout all human culture. A creation myth is usually regarded by those who subscribe to it as conveying profound truths, although not necessarily in any historic or literal sense. Because the origin of nature and of human existence was completely mystery to us, that the original word is, but I think this big history course will describe to you what science can tell about the origin of universe and the origin of our human existence. So I changed that to was. The unconscious has produced many models of this event. The same thing happens whenever human mind touches the borders of unknown. You will look at some maps of antiquity. The borderline things become a bit distorted and unknown. This map demonstrates something appears to be that wherever known reality stops, where we touch the unknown, there we will project a archetypal image onto it. There are many studies on creation myths. These are some of the books cover that is about creation myths. I will be drawing quite a bit of information from the second on the left on top, the creation myth, the second edition. This book by Mary Louise von Franks. In one of his description, he says creation myths are of a different class from other myths. The other class may be heroes or maybe fairy tales. For when they are told, there is always a certain solemnity that gives them a central importance. They convey a mood which implies that what is said will concern the basic patterns of existence, something more than is contained in other myths. Because the origin of nature and the human existence was a complete mystery to us, the unconscious has produced many models. The same thing happens wherever human minds touches the borders of the unknown, which I have said before. Now let's look at an example. Now we are going to look at two different maps. You will notice that in the center is what is known, and then as it's moving out, then it will get distorted and described less accurately. For example, this is an antiquity map of Crete. You notice the amount of description, the address, the names, etc. is very much close in the middle. The further out, then the names become scarce and the knowledge becomes less. So is this one. In the center, we have the Europe. On the other side, we have the sea. Of course, we know very little thing about the sea. And on the other side, which is also, although it's land, but you will notice that the lines, the descriptions is fewer and fewer as it moves outside the known world. Archetypal, that means the something which is first formed. It comes from a compound word archi, and then typical. Two things combined together. So archi means original. This is something original, and then it is very typical. And the other thing is what we known as a projection. Projection means the putting some subjective content into an object. We sometimes use the word projection in talking about primitive societies, but remember, we have our own projection in modern societies as well. When we talk about primitive society, we say their myths of God or gods are projection of some typical images. Of course, this will lead to confusion because in the society within which those gods are still psychologically alive, the necessity has not yet arisen from the withdrawal of the projection. You believe it's true because you have a projection onto it. Until your projection is proven wrong or you accept an alternate projection, then you will always consider what you project onto an object is always true. So there you really still have a state of a archaic identity. It's not only because we do not believe, say in the gods of some, for example in Upper Nile, we may now speak of projection, but there is an indirect application of the term. Now let's look at this example from the book. A is the human being, or the ego center of his field of consciousness, looking at objects, which is denoted C here. He doesn't understand what's this object, but in his subconscious mind, he has a archetype. This archetype is projected onto the object and give meaning to A. As long as there's no other challenge, he will always look at C, which he is unknown. For example, the origin of universe or the origin of human, something unknown. Then he will project that B onto it. For example, a lot of in the Western world we will project about there's a God, the Hebrew God or the Abrahamic God. He created the universe in 7 days or in 6 days and the rest for 1 day. This is a projection. We projected onward to it. For example, Mr. X seems to me to be a genius, and if he continually behaves as if he were one and never does anything to contradict my opinion, then nobody will ever convince me that he is not a genius. But if one day he behaves like a complete idiot, then I will say, now, why and how did I ever get the idea that this man was a genius? So it is only by having a disturbance, then we will release the previous archetype, and then immediately you will project another archetype onto the object. Now, one reason for this withdrawal of projection is that the idea of the object does not fit the facts. That something limps somewhere and does not coincide with the facts. The other very frequent possibility is that another archetype, a D in this case, started to replace or move towards to the object, and then you would from then onwards receive it as D being correct. Now this is a very typical human psychology. Therefore, if you look at the creation myth, we have to take this in mind. All the myths described here, most of them has been rejected as myth. It's not an accurate description of the universe and how our human being. But again, there are people who deeply believe that the myth represented here is true, because they haven't encountered any forces to force them to withdraw the projection and use another projection. What this course would like to do is provide you with another projection, which is based on science, based on evidence. That means we are trying to describe to you a new way to look at the universe and our human existence. But anyway, let's go back to the history and go through some of those myths. Here comes Plato, almost the original of everything in the Western culture. He got the idea that there's a pure mental forms. The idea comes from the famous Pythagoras theorem, where we have a right angle triangle. The square on the two sides of the right angle added together is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. That is the Pythagoras theorem. To him, that there are a universal cosmetic rule which would apply, and therefore he thinks of anything that is material. They may be is formed by some other things which may not be tangible. He called it the eternal form of things, and then this eternal form of things somehow materialize and becomes material objects. A famous Swiss psychologist, Carl Jung, also have this description of these psychological archetypes. These archetypes, of course, influenced by Plato's idea, which he described as the formulated meaning of a primordial image by which it was represented symbolically. In Jung's framework, archetypes are innate, universal, and is used for interpreting observations. Again, from that book, other civilizations have not been less naive than we, for they too fell into this hole of the unknown, and when confronted with the mystery, they projected mythological symbols, out of which, among other things, the creation myths arose. So what is the meaning? What is myths? Myths refers to narratives or beliefs that are untrue or merely fanciful. The stories that make up national or ethnic mythologies describes characters and events that common sense experience tell us are impossible. All cultures celebrate such myths and attribute to them varying degrees of literal or symbolic truth. Retold orally from generation to generation and or preserved secret collections or scripture, often believed to have emanated from a deity or deities, including the Bible, of course. Each culture springs into life in its own way, its own place, and develops its own priorities. It is important to remember that myths are cultural rather than universal. Creation myths, it is as ambiguous as our need to know where we came from, where and how we begin to port. This is not only our individual and family lives, but our cultural lives as well. This one is very important. We humans is a social animals. We live inside a culture, and the culture itself had different myths that we commonly subscribe to, and that give you a membership to that culture. Here I'm going to use a classification system from and then put different myths from different culture into different groups. One is the Exhiminal Creation, meaning that it comes from nothing, comes from a void, and then something suddenly creates something. like the God of Hebrews, which is subscribed by the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. In this particular myth, I think almost every people know that there was a God, and the God suddenly decided to create the universe. So we had lights, and then and the God created everything in 6 days, and then after that he rests. So this is a very common understanding originating from Middle East, and then spread throughout the world through the colonization of the Western empires in the last couple of 100 years. There are also other myths from Egypt, from ancient India, Africa, Asia, Oceanic, and North America, etc., etc. So I'm going to list some of them here. In this particular picture, we depict two gods, Osiris and Atum. They are receiving offerings. Osiris, the god of the dead and underworld, was a principal deity, or deity means god, also associated with agriculture and fertility. And then Atum was worshipped by many in early Egypt as the father of the gods. Creation of human, different area have different stories to tell. Okay, the Greek Indians of the North America say that the Creator decided to make the animals to enjoy his newly created world. That the animals felt a lack of purpose in their lives, so the Creator made humans for the animals to teach the animal and to assist in learning to survive. Of course, the Hebrew God, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, in Genesis 1, male and female in his own image. God created humans in his own image and give them guardianship over his creation. But in Genesis 2, the story is different. We were told that Eve was created from one of the Adam's ribs. In the Pawnee Indian myth, the Creator, who was originally space itself, recognized the need to populate his newly created earth and have evening star and marrying morning star. The couple produced mother of humanity, while another couple, the sun and the moon, produced father of humanity. And these were the first people. So we are projecting human marriage relationship into the midst of the formation of the first human. Obviously, the first human being first humans, it must be formed from something else. So in this particular case, it's formed from stars, moon, and sun, which we can observe, we cannot touch, we have no idea what they really are, and therefore we can project image onto them. In Africa, a creator, Enkai, created the first humans out of a tree that he split into 3 parts. One part being a father, one part another father, and another part being father. That means the 3 stripes that is around there. In South America, in the Chile region, they believe that man was first, the Creator first made a world, and then people improve with his spirit. First a woman, and then as her companion, a man. Now this is the opposite of the Hebrew story. In the Yolanga Aborigines of the Northeast Hamland in Australia. In that, the myth explains that people are descendants from such a relationship between a brother and a sister with oversized sexual organs who created the stripe, the world, and then they were roaming around during a ancient time. Another group is creation from chaos. Initially, the creative material is there, and then some creator comes along, arrange the creative material, and then make it into a organized world, and that is a creation from chaos. There are examples such as the creation from China, or the creation from Japan, or from the Yaqui Indians of California, or even in Africa. They talk about there was a primordial mix, and then somehow a creator come along and then break it apart, separate them, and then making water mud and become dry land, and then something light become air and heaven. This is the version from Chinese Pangu. In the beginning, there was nothing, and the universe was in a featureless, formless, primordial state. This primordial state eventually coalesces into a cosmic egg for about 18,000 years. And then within it, there's a perfectly opposite principles of yin and yang balanced. And then this Pangu appears from the egg, and then he pushes the yin and yang apart, and then he is growing very fast every day, and he grows a long time, and therefore he pushes the sky very high and the earth very deep, and then forms the universe that we live on. And then when he dies, his body parts separate into different things and become a different beast and so forth. Babylonian cosmological myths. The other one is a world parent creation. The world parent myth involves the breaking apart of a static primordial state. In one from the world parents myth, the beginning consists of an eternal union of parents, a union that has been broken in order for creation to take place. That includes a lot of stories, typically in different parts of the world. Where is that? California, and all kinds of this. This is the Greek god Zeus, and this is another Greek god Thor, who created the universe and created thunder and lightning and so forth. Another one is emergence creation. Central to most creation myths is the creation of human beings. In the creation myth types discussed above, the creation of humans is usually only one aspect of the overall creation of the universe. But in the type of myth known as the emergence creation, the emphasis is squarely on the creation of humanity. In this myth type, the focus is on a process by which humans emerge into stages in this world from maybe underworld, and in the Christian myth or the Abrahamic myth, after the God created the universe, he focuses on human and human alone, and then put human in charge, and then God interacts with the human. So in the Akuma myth, two sister spirits grew slowly and knew one another only by touch. When they are ready, thinking women who had taught them language give them baskets containing seeds for all plants and models of all the animals that will be in the next world. The sisters, always with thinking women's help, took 3 seeds from the basket and planted them, and a pine tree finally grew high enough to break a hole through to the top of the underworld, letting in a little light. Then the sister gives light to some animals models to their basket, and these models help prepare the hole for the emergence. Eventually, the sister climbed the pine tree with their basket and broke through into this world. Something like that. Earth diver creation. Instead of going up into the heaven, some myths talk about diving into the earth. I'm not going to go into every details of this one. If you like, you can actually take images of the screen and then do the search yourself. Typical stories, of course, we know that there's sea around us and there are land, and therefore there must be a giant animal floating in the sea, and it was supported, and the land is supported on this infinite sea. This is a typical Native American myth. Another area is about what about the end of the world. Again, there's a lot of myths talk about the end of the world as well. If the world has a beginning, it might also one day come to an end. Yet not all mythologies make the jump. Christians talk about the second coming, the coming of Jesus. The Jews believe that there will be a Messiah who will eventually come. And of course, the Christians say the Messiah is Jesus. But Jews doesn't believe that. And in many cases, the end is only a beginning, a new beginning. In each case, the world destruction is followed by a new age. So the kind of clean the sky, the slate, and then start everything again. So that is another way of looking at the myth. So thank you for watching, and next time we'll get into some fundamental understanding from science. Next time we'll talk about atomic theory. After that, then we are now prepared to go into cosmology.